Good morning, students. Today we are going to learn Standard 10, third unit, third lesson. Stephen Hawking. He was born on 8th January 1942. At that time, when the article was written and published, he was alive, but he passed away on 14th March 2018. So in this chapter the references about him are in present tense. He is an English theoretical physicist. Physicist means expert in physics. Cosmologist. Cosmology, that is a science of the origin and development of universe. So he was studying cosmology first. So he was a physicist, cosmologist, author and director of research at the Center of Theoretical Cosmology within the Cambridge University, which was located at London. Stephen Hawking was the first to set out means to begin, a theory of cosmology explained by a union of the general theory of relativity and quantum machines. Hawking is an honorary fellow of the Royal Society of the Arts. In short, it is called FRSA. It means Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts, a lifetime member of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, and a recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which was the highest civilian award in the US. In one line, it has been mentioned about him that the lesson gives us an insight. Insight means a feeling of understanding about the great scientist, his life and his works. So how he worked to help us. Stephen Hawking, who was born on 8 January 1942, is a British scientist, a professor and author who has done groundbreaking work in physics and cosmology. Groundbreaking means producing something like nothing less or eminent. So he had done some special work about physics and cosmology, and whose books have helped to make science accessible to everyone. Accessible means able to be reached. At the age of 21, while studying cosmology at the University of Cambridge, he was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, that is ALS. So it is a more progressive and degenerative fatal disease. Part of his life story was depicted in the 2014 film The Theory of Everything. Over the years, Stephen Hawking has written or co-written a total of 15 books. So written or co-written means at the end of his life, he was unable to write. So somebody helped him to write the books. That's why the sentence is used that Stephen Hawking has written or co-written a total of 15 books. A few of the most noteworthy include, so among these books, noteworthy, remarkable books are there. In the year 1988, Stephen Hawking catapulted. Catapulted means launched, that is started, to international prominence. Prominence means widely known, that is eminent, with the publication of A Brief History of Time. It means in 1988 he had written a book called A Brief History of Time. The short, informative book became an account of cosmology for the masses and offered an overview of space and time. So, this one was a short book, but this book became an account of cosmology for so many people and offered an overview of space and time. Overview means general summary of a subject, the existence of God and the future. The work was an instant success. So why it is said that the work was an instant success? Instant means in a very short time, immediately. Spending more than 4 years atop the London Sunday Times bestseller list. Since its publication, it has sold millions of copies worldwide and been translated into more than 40 languages. It means the book was so big, so useful that millions of copies of this book had been sold, and this book has been translated into more than 40 languages. A Brief History of Time also wasn't as easy to understand as some had hoped. So, in the year 2001, Hawking followed up his book with the name of The Universe in a Nutshell. It means he had written another more book in the year 2001 that is called The Universe in a Nutshell, which offered a more illustrated guide to cosmology's big theories. So, in this book, he had explained the earlier topic in detail. In 2005, Hawking authored the even more accessible book that is called A Briefer History of Time, which further simplified the original work's core. Core means central or basic concepts, and touched upon the newest developments in the field like string theory. Together, these three books means the book written in 1988, that is A Brief History of Time, second book written in 2001 called The Universe in a Nutshell, and the third book written in 2005, that is A Briefer History of Time. So these three books, along with Hawking's own research and papers, articulate the physicist's personal search for science's holy grail, a single unifying theory that can combine cosmology, that is the study of the big, with quantum machines, the study of the small, to explain how the universe began. So in these books he had written how the universe began. It's this kind of ambitious thinking that has allowed Hawking, who claims he can think in 11 dimensions, to lay out some big possibilities for humankind. He is convinced that time travel is possible. So he was sure that it was possible for the human being that they can do time travel, and that humans may indeed colonize other planets in the future. So he was sure that in future the people will make their own colonies on other planets. In September 2010, Hawking spoke against the idea that God could have created the universe in his book The Grand Design. So she had written the next book in 2010. The name of that book is The Grand Design, and in this book he mentioned the opposite opinion of the earlier one, that was God could have created the universe. Hawking previously argued that belief in a creator could be compatible. Compatible means able to exist with modern scientific theories. His new work, however, concluded that the Big Bang was the inevitable. Inevitable means unavoidable consequence of the laws of physics and nothing more. So, in this book, he had mentioned that the universe and all the creatures and all the living things are there only because of the laws of physics, nothing more. Because there is a law such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. So he had given the reason also. Why doesn't he believe that God had created the universe? Because only this planet has the capacity to create the gravitation power, and the planet will do the same. Hawking said, spontaneous creation is the reason that something rather than nothing. Why the universe exists? Why we exist? So he said that spontaneous, that is voluntary creation is something rather than anything. So he had mentioned in this book why the universe exists, why we exist. The Grand Design was Hawking's first major publication in almost a decade. Decade means a group of 10 years. Within his new work, Hawking set out to challenge Sir Isaac Newton's belief that the universe had to have been designed by God. So here he had said that he doesn't believe in the opinion that the God had created the universe. Simply because it could not have been born from chaos. Chaos means complete disorder and confusion. So in this way, Stephen Hawking opposed. He is not ready to believe that God had created the universe. And he said it's not necessary to invoke God to light the blue touch paper and set the universe going. He said. So what he said? That it's not necessary, it's not essential to invoke God to light the blue touch paper and set the universe going. It means that if we do not invoke God, invoke means to pray, to make the God happy. At the age of 21, Stephen Hawking was diagnosed. So diagnosed means detection of medical condition. So at that time he was diagnosed with the disease ALS. The full form of this ALS is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or Lou Gehrig's disease. In a very simple sense, the nerves that control his muscles were shutting down. At the time, doctors gave him 2.5 years to live. So how much time had been given to him? 2.5 years to live by the doctors. Hawking first began to notice problems with his physical health while he was at Oxford. On occasion, he would trip and fall or slur his speech. Slur means play smoothly. He didn't look into the problem until 1963, During his first year at Cambridge, for the most part, Hawking had kept these symptoms to himself. It means he did not disclose it with anyone else. He didn't tell even his parents about his physical problems. But when his father took notice of the condition, he took Hawking to see a doctor. So when his father came to know that Stephen Hawking was having a physical problem, then he took him to see a doctor. For the next 2 weeks, the 21-year-old college student made his home at a medical clinic where he underwent a series of tests. So when he visited a doctor, the doctor prescribed various kinds of tests, and then he made his home at a medical clinic where he underwent a series of tests. They took a muscle sample from my arm, Stephen Hawking said, stuck electrodes into me and injected some radioactive fluid, that is liquid, into my spine. Spine means backbone, and watched it going up and down with X-rays as they tilted the bed. Tilt means move in an unsteady way. He once said, after all that, they didn't tell me what I had, except that it was not multiple sclerosis and that I was an atypical case. So atypical means very unusual. Eventually, it means finally. However, doctors did diagnose Hawking with the early stages of ALS. It was devastating news. Devastating means a shocking news, causing a severe shock to his family members. But a few events prevented him from becoming completely despondent. Despondent means discouraged. So through this lesson, Stephen Hawking, we have been convinced that though there are difficulties in our life, but we must be encouraged. We must take it positively. Now see here, now the doctors have given him only 2.5 years, but some of the occasions took place in his life, and these occasions stopped him, prevented him from being completely discouraged. So what were the events? What were the occasions? They have been told in this chapter. The first of these came while Hawking was still in the hospital. There he shared a room with a boy suffering from leukemia, relative to what his roommate was going through. Hawking later reflected. Later means after. Reflected means thought. His situation seemed more tolerable. So later on, he came to know that his situation was more tolerable. Tolerable means it was possible for him to endure. Hawking had a dream that he was going to be executed. So now he had mentioned the second one event where he says that he had seen a dream, and in that dream he was going to be executed. So he took it positively and thought that he had a very little time to do something, to do his own work. He said This dream made him realize that there were still things to do with his life. In a sense, Hawking's disease helped him become the noted scientist he is today. Before the diagnosis, Hawking hadn't always focused on his studies. He said that before my condition was diagnosed, I'd been very bored with life. So here he had said that before the diagnosis of ALS, his life was very boring, exhausted, and he did not focus on his studies. He said there had not seemed to be anything worth among. With the sudden realization that he might not even live long enough to earn his PhD. So he thought that he may not be able to complete his doctorate degree, that is PhD. Hawking poured himself into his work from that time, into his work and research. As physical control over his body diminished means reduced, he'd be forced to use a wheelchair by 1969. The effects of his disease started to slow down. Over time, however, he was gradually losing the control on his body. Hawking's over-expanding career was accompanied by an ever-worsening physical state. By the mid-1970s, the Hawking family had taken in one of Hawking's graduate students to help manage his care and work. He could still feed himself and get out of bed, but virtually everything else required assistance. In addition, his speech had become increasingly slurred, so that only those who knew him well could understand him. In 1985, he lost his voice for good following a tracheotomy. The resulting situation required 24-hour nursing care for the acclaimed physicist. It also put in peril Hawking's ability to do his work. The predicament caught the attention of a California computer programmer, through which whatever Stephen Hawking wants to see can be identified with the help of that programmer because of the movement of his head and eyes. Through the program and the help of assistants, Stephen Hawking has continued to write at a prolific rate. His work has included numerous scientific papers, of course, but also information for the non-scientific community. It means his writing and research was useful for both, for scientific community and non-scientific community also. Hawking's health, of course, remains a constant concern, that is a continuous worry. That was heightened in 2009 when he failed to appear at a conference in Arizona because of a chest infection. In April, Hawking, who had already announced he was returning after 30 years from the post of Lucasian Professor of Mathematics at Cambridge, was rushed to the hospital for being what university officials described as gravely ill. Gravely ill means seriously ill. It was later announced that he was expected to make a full recovery. So later on, afterwards, it was announced that Stephen Hawking expected that he would be recovered fully. Thank you.